You wake up. You go to work. You scroll. You sleep. You repeat, and somewhere between the notifications and the obligations, between the morning coffee and the evening collapse, you ask yourself a question you're almost afraid to voice. Is this it? Is this all there is? If you've ever felt like you're living someone else's life, chasing goals that don't satisfy you, drowning in distractions that leave you emptier than before, listen carefully. You're not broken. You're not weak. You're not failing at life. You're experiencing what a French Algerian philosopher named Albert Camus called the absurd dot in 1942. While Europe burned under Nazi occupation and humanity faced its darkest hour, Camus sat down and wrote words that would haunt generations. There's only one really serious philosophical question, and that is suicide. Not because he wanted you to end your life, but because he wanted you to confront the most uncomfortable truth that exists. The universe doesn't care about you. Your goals? Meaningless to the cosmos. Your suffering? Irrelevant to the stars. Your achievements? Forgotten by time. And yet, here we are. Still pushing. Still striving. Still searching for something we can't name. Camus wasn't a nihilist preaching despair. He was pointing at something far more radical, far more dangerous to the comfortable lies we tell ourselves. He was saying, if nothing has inherent meaning, then everything you choose to care about becomes sacred. But most people in 2026 have forgotten this ancient truth. They've traded authenticity for comfort, meaning for distraction, rebellion for obedience. What if the reason you feel lost isn't because you lack purpose? What if it's because you've been living someone else's idea of it? Someone else's script? Someone else's dream. By the end of this journey, you'll understand why Camus believed that the struggle itself is enough. Why he claimed that we must imagine Sisyphus happy, even as he pushes his boulder uphill for eternity. And why the solution to your emptiness isn't more goals, more therapy, more motivation, but something far more uncomfortable. The question is, are you ready to hear it? Let's start with the truth no one wants to admit. You've been lied to your entire life. Not by one person, not by one institution, but by the entire architecture of meaning that surrounds you. They told you, go to school and you'll find purpose. Get a degree and you'll be fulfilled. Climb the career ladder and satisfaction awaits at the top. Find love and you'll be complete. Buy this, achieve that. Become someone, and you did it all. Or you're doing it now. Or you're about to start. But somewhere along the way, the promise broke down. The script stopped making sense. And you found yourself standing in the middle of your own life, looking around and asking, what am I doing here? This is the absurd. And Camus saw it coming decades before smartphones existed. Before social media turned existence into performance. Before the attention economy commodified every moment of your consciousness. The absurd is the collision between two fundamental truths. First, humans desperately need meaning, order, clarity. We need to believe our lives matter, that our suffering counts for something, that there's a reason we're here. Second, the universe offers none of this. It's silent, indifferent, chaotic. You are a meaning-seeking creature trapped in a meaningless cosmos. And the tension between these two realities is what creates the feeling that most people describe as being lost. Look at your life right now. How much of it is truly yours? How many of your goals did you actually choose versus inherit from your parents, your culture, your algorithms? How many hours do you spend each day running from the silence? Filling every gap with noise, every moment with distraction, every uncomfortable feeling with another scroll, another click, another hit of dopamine that leaves you emptier than before. Camus would look at modern life and see the absurd magnified to unbearable proportions. The endless content, the infinite scroll, the illusion of choice masking the reality of conditioning, the constant comparison, the performance of happiness, The exhausting labor of maintaining an identity you're not even sure you want. You're not just living in the absurd. You're drowning in it. And here's what makes it worse. You've been trained to believe that the problem is you. That if you just tried harder, thought more positively, hustled more intensely, you'd finally break through to that place where everything makes sense, where everything clicks, where the emptiness finally fills. But what if that place doesn't exist? What if the entire game is rigged not by malice, but by the simple fact that existence itself has no instruction manual, no guarantee, no ultimate point? Camus wrote, "At any street corner, the feeling of absurdity can strike any man in the face." He meant it literally. You're sitting in traffic, and suddenly you realize you're burning hours of your finite life trapped in a metal box, crawling toward a job you tolerate, to earn money for a life you're not even sure you want. Or you're lying in bed at 3 in the morning, and the weight of it all crashes down. The routines, the expectations, the years ahead that look suspiciously like the years behind. This isn't depression, though it can lead there. This isn't weakness, though it feels crushing. This is clarity. This is the moment when the veil drops and you see the machinery for what it is, and the instinct, the immediate, overwhelming instinct is to run, to escape, to find some way, any way, to make the feeling stop. Which brings us to the most important question Camus ever asked. Once you've seen the absurd, once you've felt the full weight of meaninglessness, what do you do next? Because here's the terrifying truth. Most people choose wrong. When confronted with the absurd, with the overwhelming realization that existence has no inherent meaning, human beings have 3 possible responses. Only one of them is honest. Only one of them is truly free. And chances are, you're not choosing it. The first response is physical suicide. This is the most obvious escape. If life is meaningless, why continue? If suffering has no purpose, why endure it? Camus acknowledged this response, but called it a confession of defeat. It's the ultimate escape, yes, but it's also the ultimate surrender. It solves nothing because it abandons the question entirely. But here's what most people miss. Camus wasn't nearly as concerned with physical suicide as he was with the second response. Because the second response is everywhere. It's normalized. It's celebrated. And you're probably engaging in it right now, without even realizing it. Camus called it philosophical suicide. Philosophical suicide is the act of leaping into a false certainty to escape the anxiety of meaninglessness. It's choosing the comforting lie over an uncomfortable truth. It's finding something, anything to believe in so completely that you no longer have to face the absurd. And modern life offers you an endless buffet of philosophical suicides. Religion can be philosophical suicide when it's used not as a genuine spiritual practice, but as an escape from existential responsibility. Ideology can be philosophical suicide when you cling to political beliefs not because they're true, but because they offer the illusion of moral certainty. Career can be philosophical suicide when you let professional achievement define your worth so completely that you never have to ask who you are beneath the title. Relationships, status, nationalism, consumerism, even therapy, even self-help, even spirituality, all of these can become forms of philosophical suicide when they're used to avoid the fundamental question, what do I do with a life that has no script? But the most seductive philosophical suicide in 2026 isn't any grand ideology. It's distraction. You know this already. You feel it every time you reach for your phone without thinking. Every time you binge another series to avoid the silence. Every time you fill your calendar so completely that you never have to sit alone with your thoughts. Distraction is the modern opiate. And unlike traditional philosophical suicides that require commitment, distraction requires nothing. Just surrender. Just scroll. Just let the algorithm decide what you think about, what you feel, what you want. The tragic irony is that the more we try to escape the absurd through distraction, the more absurd our lives become. We're more connected than ever and more lonely. We have more information than ever and less wisdom. We have more freedom of choice than any generation in history and less clarity about what we actually want. You're not living. You're buffering. Endlessly buffering between moments of clarity that terrify you and moments of distraction that numb you. Camus would say you're committing philosophical suicide, one scroll at a time. You're choosing the comfort of mindlessness over the terror of consciousness. And every time you do, you're betraying the only thing that makes you human, your ability to choose. Because here's the third response. The one Camus dedicated his entire philosophy to defending: revolt. Not political revolution. Not violent uprising. But metaphysical rebellion. The conscious choice to live fully, passionately, intensely, despite the certainty that nothing ultimately matters. To look directly absurd, to acknowledge that life has no inherent meaning, and to say, I will create my own meaning anyway. I will live on my own terms. I will not escape, and I will not surrender. Revolt is the refusal to lie to yourself. It's the refusal to seek comfort in false certainties. It's the decision to remain lucid, to stay conscious, to face the chaos and meaninglessness and still choose to act, to love, to build, to fight, to live. But here's what makes revolt terrifying. It offers no guarantees. No cosmic justice. No ultimate redemption. No happy ending written in the stars. Revolt is the hardest path because it demands that you carry the full weight of your freedom without any safety net. Most people can't handle it. Most people reach for the nearest philosophical suicide the moment the pressure builds. A new ideology, a new distraction, a new belief system that promises to make it all make sense. And Camus would look at you with those piercing eyes and ask, are you truly living, or are you just running? Are you choosing your life, or are you being chosen by your fears? Think about your life right now. Not the version you present on social media. Not the story you tell at parties. The real version. The 3 a.m. version. How much of it is authentic revolt? How much of it is philosophical suicide? Because if you're honest, truly honest, you'll realize that most of what you call living is actually escaping. Most of what you call purpose is actually conditioning. Most of what you call freedom is actually just a more comfortable cage. So here's the question I need you to sit with. What are you running from? And more importantly, what would your life look like if you stopped? There's an ancient Greek myth that Camus believed held the secret to human existence. And once you understand it, you'll never look at your life the same way. The myth is this: Sisyphus, a king known for his cunning and deceit, angered the gods so thoroughly that they condemned him to the worst punishment they could imagine. He was forced to push an enormous boulder up a steep mountain. And every time he neared the summit, every time he thought his task was complete, the boulder would roll back down to the bottom. And he would have to start again, forever. Push, climb, reach the top. Watch it fall, repeat, for eternity. When you first hear this story, it sounds like the definition of hell. Meaningless labor. Endless repetition. No progress. No escape. Just the same futile task, forever. And that's exactly why Camus chose it. Because isn't that your life? Don't you wake up every day and push your own boulder? You work, you eat, you sleep. You pursue goals that, even when achieved, leave you unsatisfied. You build things that time will erase. You form relationships that will end. You create meaning that the universe will forget. Your boulder might be your career. Your boulder might be your health, your relationships, your creative work. You push it uphill with every ounce of strength you have. And just when you think you've made it, just when you think you've arrived, you wake up the next morning and realize the boulder is back at the bottom. The work isn't done. It's never done. It will never be done. This is the human condition. This is what Camus meant by the absurd made visible. But here's where the story takes its turn. Here's where Camus delivers the most radical philosophical statement of the 20th century. He ends his essay on Sisyphus with these words: "One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Happy, not resigned. Not content. Not accepting. Happy. How? How could anyone condemned to eternal, meaningless labor be happy? Because somewhere on that walk back down the mountain, somewhere in that moment of full consciousness when Sisyphus sees his boulder at the bottom and knows he must push it again, he makes a choice. He looks at his fate, this absurd, meaningless, endless task, and he decides, this is mine. I claim it. I own it. No God gave this meaning. No cosmic plan justifies it. But I choose it anyway. Sisyphus is happy because he stops waiting for his suffering to make sense. He stops hoping for redemption. He stops asking for permission to find meaning in a meaningless task. He simply decides that the struggle itself is enough. And this is the secret no one tells you about modern life. You're already Sisyphus. The only question is whether you're conscious of it. Most people push their boulder in a state of delusion. They tell themselves, once I get the promotion, then I'll be happy. Once I find the right relationship, then I'll be complete. Once I achieve this goal, then my life will have meaning. They push the boulder while lying to themselves about what's happening. And when the boulder rolls back down, when the promotion doesn't satisfy, when the relationship ends, when the goal proves hollow, they feel betrayed. They feel cheated. They feel lost. But what if you stopped lying? What if you looked at your boulder and said, this task is meaningless, and I'm going to give it everything I have anyway. This relationship will end someday, and I will love with my whole heart regardless. This work will be forgotten, and I will do it with full passion regardless. This boulder will roll back down, and I will push it again, because I choose to. That's revolt. That's freedom. That's what Camus meant when he said we must imagine Sisyphus happy. The happiness doesn't come from the outcome. It comes from the choice. It comes from the full consciousness, the full ownership, the full rebellion against the absurdity of your condition. Listen carefully. You will never reach a point in your life where everything makes sense, where all your questions are answered, where all your suffering has a purpose that satisfies you. The boulder will always roll back down. The task will always reset. The struggle will always continue, and you have two choices. You can spend your entire life waiting for the boulder to stay at the top, waiting for the moment when life finally rewards your effort, when the universe finally justifies your pain, when everything clicks into place and the struggle ends. You can live in perpetual disappointment, perpetual resentment, perpetually feeling cheated by existence. Or you can walk back down that mountain, look at your boulder, and smile. Because you know something the gods don't. You know that they thought meaninglessness would break you. They thought the lack of purpose would destroy you. But you found something they never expected. You found that meaning doesn't come from the universe. It comes from you. Purpose isn't discovered. It's created. And the most radical act of freedom available to any human being is to look at a meaningless universe and choose to live passionately anyway. This is what most people are missing in 2026. They're pushing their boulders in a state of unconsciousness. They're scrolling through life waiting for someone to hand them a reason to care. They're trapped in philosophical suicide, desperate for some external force, a guru, a movement, a belief system, an algorithm to tell them what to do with their finite existence. But Sisyphus doesn't wait for permission. He doesn't wait for meaning. He doesn't wait for the gods to release him. He claims his suffering. He owns his fate. He transforms his punishment into his purpose by the sheer force of consciousness. And so can you. The boulder is already at your feet. You're already pushing it. The only question is, are you doing it consciously? Are you choosing it? Or are you still waiting for someone to tell you it's okay to be happy despite the absurdity? Because I want to thank you for staying with me this far, for sitting with these uncomfortable truths, for not running to the nearest distraction the moment the weight of it all pressed down. Most people can't do what you're doing right now. Most people would have clicked away, scrolled past, found something easier to consume. But you're still here. And that tells me something about you. It tells me you're ready for what comes next, because we're about to go deeper. We're about to examine the man who wrote these words, who lived these ideas, who embodied this philosophy, and whose life was just as contradictory, just as absurd, just as human as yours. And the best part? The most important part? That's still ahead. Now we need to talk about the man himself. Because if you're going to understand Albert Camus, if you're going to truly grasp what he was trying to say, you need to know that he wasn't some detached philosopher writing from an ivory tower. He was a man torn apart by the same contradictions he wrote about. Albert Camus was born in 1913 in Mondovi, Algeria, then a French colony. His father, a farm worker, died in the First World War when Camus was barely a year old. His mother was partially deaf, illiterate, and worked as a cleaning woman to keep the family alive. They lived in poverty in a working-class neighborhood of Algiers, in a cramped apartment with no electricity and no running water. This is the world that shaped him: poverty, colonialism, violence, the crushing weight of circumstances you didn't choose. And throughout his entire life, Camus would carry this question: what do you do when you're born into a world that offers you nothing but suffering and asks you to make something of it anyway? He fell in love with philosophy through his high school teacher, who saw something in this poor Algerian kid and encouraged him to pursue ideas. Camus read voraciously. He absorbed Nietzsche, Dostoevsky, the Greek tragedians, and he began to see that his poverty, his suffering, his sense of being an outsider, all of this wasn't a disadvantage. It was clarity. He wasn't comfortable enough to lie to himself. He wasn't privileged enough to believe in easy answers. He saw the absurd not through theory, but through lived experience. But here's where the contradictions begin. During the Second World War, Camus joined the French resistance. He edited the underground newspaper Combat, risking his life to fight Nazi occupation. He wrote about freedom, about justice, about the moral duty to resist tyranny. And after the war, he became one of the most celebrated intellectuals in France, eventually winning the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1957. But while he wrote passionately about freedom and justice, he also defended French colonialism in Algeria. He couldn't bring himself to support Algerian independence, even as the colonial system brutalized the people he grew up with. He said he believed in his mother more than he believed in justice, meaning he couldn't support a movement that might endanger her. Was this hypocrisy? Or was it the honest struggle of a man trying to navigate impossible moral terrain? Was it philosophical suicide clinging to tribalism to avoid existential complexity? Or was it something more human, the recognition that principles, no matter how pure, collide with love, with loyalty, with the messy reality of actual lives? Camus himself never resolved this contradiction, and it haunted him. He fought bitterly with Jean-Paul Sartre, once his closest friend, over questions of morality and politics. Sartre accused him of being insufficiently committed to revolution. Camus accused Sartre of justifying totalitarianism in the name of ideology. Both men were right. Both men were wrong. Both men were trapped in the absurd, trying to find a way to live ethically in a world that offers no clear ethical guidelines. Camus' personal life was equally fractured. He married twice. He had affairs. He struggled with his fame, feeling increasingly isolated by his own celebrity. He wrote about authenticity while performing for audiences. He wrote about rebellion while being absorbed into the establishment. He wrote about freedom while feeling trapped by expectation. And here's the uncomfortable truth: Camus never fully escaped the problems he diagnosed. He never found a clean resolution to the absurd. He died at 46 in a car crash on a French highway, with the unfinished manuscript of his next novel in his briefcase. Some people say he died absurdly randomly, meaninglessly, in the middle of his work. Others say he died exactly as he lived, in full confrontation with the arbitrary nature of existence. But here's why this matters. Here's why you need to know that Camus was just as lost, just as contradictory, just as flawed as you are, because the point was never to become perfect. The point was never to transcend the absurd, to escape the contradictions, to arrive at some final enlightened state where everything makes sense. The point was to live consciously within the contradictions, to be honest about the impossibility of moral certainty while still making moral choices, to acknowledge that all principles are ultimately arbitrary while still fighting for the ones you choose, to admit that your life will never fully cohere into a satisfying narrative while still living it with passion. Camus didn't have the answers. He had the questions, and he had the courage to live inside those questions without flinching. He wrote, "I shall tell you a great secret, my friend. Do not wait for the last judgment. It takes place every day. Every day you are judging yourself. Every day you are choosing between authenticity and escape. Every day you are deciding whether to face the absurd or run from it. And every day you will fail at something. You will contradict yourself. You will fall short of your own principles. You will choose comfort over truth, convenience over courage. You will be human. And that's the whole point." Camus didn't write his philosophy to create perfect people. He wrote it to create honest ones. People who can look at their own contradictions, their own failures, their own absurd existence and say, "Yes, this is me. This is all I have. And it's enough." Because when you stop demanding perfection from yourself, when you stop waiting to become someone worthy of living fully, when you accept that you are and will always be a flawed, contradictory, absurd creature fumbling through a meaningless universe, that's when you finally become free. That's when you finally understand what Camus was trying to say all along. So here we are, at the end of this journey. And if you've been paying attention, you've realized something unsettling. I haven't given you a solution. I haven't told you how to fix your life. I haven't handed you a system, a strategy, a 5-step plan to escape the feeling of being lost, because that was never the point. What Camus understood, what most modern self-help gurus will never tell you, what every distraction-peddling algorithm desperately wants you to forget, is this: you don't need meaning to live well. You need passion. You need intensity. You need to stop waiting. Stop waiting for clarity. Stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting for the perfect moment when everything makes sense. Stop waiting for someone to hand you a script, a purpose, a reason that satisfies you, because it's never coming. The universe will never justify your suffering. Your parents will never give you the childhood you needed. Your career will never fill the void. Your relationships will never complete you. Your achievements will never prove you're enough. The boulder will never stay at the top of the mountain. And here's the truth that makes people uncomfortable. The truth that gets buried under layers of optimism and positive thinking and manufactured hope. That's okay. That's not a tragedy. That's just reality. The tragedy is spending your entire life waiting for reality to be different. The tragedy is pushing your boulder while telling yourself that one day, if you just push hard enough, the gods will let you stop. The tragedy is living in a constant state of disappointment because existence refuses to live up to expectations it never promised to meet. Camus spent his entire life trying to tell you, you're free right now. Not when you achieve your goals. Not when you find your purpose. Not when you finally figure out who you are. Right now. This moment. You're as free as you will ever be. But freedom isn't the absence of constraints. Freedom is the full consciousness of your constraints and the choice to act anyway. Freedom is looking at your boulder and saying, I didn't choose this, but I choose what I do with it. You were born without your consent into a world you didn't design, with a body you didn't pick, with circumstances you didn't create. None of it is fair. None of it makes sense. None of it will ever satisfy the part of you that demands cosmic justice, ultimate meaning, perfect resolution. And your only real choice is this: will you spend your finite existence resenting these facts? Or will you spend it creating something beautiful anyway? Because beauty doesn't require meaning. Love doesn't require justification. Passion doesn't require purpose. These things exist despite the meaninglessness. Not because of some hidden meaning you haven't found yet. When you help someone who will never thank you. When you create something that time will erase. When you love knowing you will lose what you love. You're not being foolish. You're not being naive. You're not missing some deeper truth that would make you stop caring. You're being human. Fully, radically, absurdly human, and that's rebellion. Not the kind that overthrows governments. The kind that overthrows the tyranny of meaning itself. The kind that says, I don't need the universe to validate my choices for my choices to matter to me. This is what no one tells you, because this is what no one wants to hear. We've built entire industries around the promise that your life can make perfect sense if you just buy the right product, follow the right guru, adopt the right mindset. We've created a culture that treats existential anxiety as a problem to be solved rather than a reality to be lived. But Camus would tell you, your anxiety isn't a disorder. It's clarity. Your feeling of being lost isn't a failure. It's honesty. Your sense that nothing quite adds up, that no achievement satisfies, that no answer fully answers. That's not you being broken. That's you being awake. And once you're awake, you can't go back to sleep. You can't unsee the absurd. You can't unknow the truth that existence offers no guarantees, no script, no cosmic plan that makes everything okay in the end. So what do you do with this knowledge? You live, not in the future, not in the past, not in some imagined version of yourself that finally has it all figured out. You live right now with whatever you have, wherever you are, exactly as you are. You stop asking, what's the point? And start asking, what do I choose to care about anyway? You stop demanding that life owe you something, and start deciding what you owe to the life you've been given. You stop looking for the moment when the struggle ends and start finding meaning in the struggle itself, because Camus was right about Sisyphus. The happiness doesn't come from reaching the top. It comes from owning the journey, from walking back down that mountain with full consciousness and full defiance, and choosing to push again, not because you have to, not because it makes sense, not because someone promised you a reward, but because you can, because you're alive, because the boulder is there and you have hands and the only alternative is surrender. And you didn't come this far. You didn't sit through this entire conversation. You didn't wrestle with these uncomfortable truths just to surrender now. So here's my final question for you. What are you going to do with your freedom? Not tomorrow, not someday, right now. What are you going to choose to care about, to fight for, to create, to love, not because it matters to the universe, but because you decided it matters to you? Because the universe doesn't care if you waste your freedom. The universe doesn't care if you spend your entire life running from yourself. The universe doesn't care if you choose philosophical suicide over conscious rebellion. But I'm willing to bet you care. I'm willing to bet that somewhere beneath all the noise, beneath all the conditioning, beneath all the comfortable lies you've been told, there's a part of you that knows exactly what Camus was talking about. A part of you that's been waiting for permission to stop pretending, to stop performing, to stop living someone else's idea of what your life should be. Consider this your permission. Not from me, not from Camus, from yourself that the only authority that matters is the one you claim. The only meaning that counts is the one you create. The only life worth living is the one you choose. Fully conscious of its absurdity, fully committed to its intensity, fully present in its brief and precious chaos. So let me ask you one more time, and I want you to really think about it. Are you living, or are you just surviving? Are you choosing, or are you being chosen? Are you rebelling, or are you escaping? Because if this conversation challenged something in you, if it made you question the routines you never examined, the goals you never wanted, the script you never chose, then don't let this be the end. Let this be the beginning. Subscribe to this channel, not because we have all the answers, but because we refuse to accept the easy ones. We refuse to pretend that life makes sense when it doesn't. We refuse to sell you comfort when what you need is truth. And when you're done, watch the next video waiting for you. Because this conversation about meaning, about rebellion, about living authentically in an absurd world, it's far from over. We're just getting started. Camus once wrote, "The only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion." So tell me, are you ready to rebel? Not against the government, not against society, against the tyranny of meaninglessness itself, against the lie that you need permission to live fully, against the comfortable delusion that one day, if you just wait long enough, everything will finally make sense, that your boulder is waiting. And you have a choice to make. Push it with full consciousness. Push it with full defiance. Push it knowing it will roll back down. And when it does, walk back down that mountain, look at it again, and smile. Because you know something the gods don't. You know that they thought meaninglessness would break you. But you found the one thing they never expected. You found that the struggle itself is enough.